Before we get started, remember to like and follow for more impactful stories that will stick with you. A naive influencer attacks Chuck Norris in a fancy restaurant and immediately apologizes. You're kidding me, right? Don't you know who I am? Haley Blake stood at the entrance of El Royal, an opulent, fine dining establishment where the chandeliers looked expensive enough to be insured separately, and where the kind of people who mattered in society came to see and be seen. But apparently, the people working the door had no idea who they were dealing with. The hostess, a young woman dressed in an immaculate black uniform, smiled patiently but firmly. Her voice pierced the air like a nail on glass. "We do require a reservation for entry, ma'am." Haley sneered, tossing her pricey hair over one shoulder. "Are you serious?" She turned her phone towards herself and pressed the record button. "All right, Lux babies, get this. I'm at El Royale, the hottest restaurant in town, and they're telling me I need a reservation. Do they not realize that I'm essentially free publicity?" The hostess moved uneasily, "Ma'am. We do have a rule." "Okay, honey, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go back there and tell your little manager friend that Haley Blake is here, and they're going to get me a table because if you don't, they'll find me one." Haley cut her off with a dismissive wave of her hand. 2 million people will hear about El Royale's treatment of VIP visitors. The hostess hesitated, and for a brief moment, her professional smile flickered. That was all Haley needed, so she pressed in closer and lowered her voice just enough to appear more menacing. The hostess's lips were parted as though to argue, but Haley simply rolled her eyes. "I don't have time for this, so get it done." Defeated. "I'm sure your boss wouldn't. Want a social media scandal, right? You think a negative review from a food critic matters, so try having every influencer in the city disparage this place." After a quick exchange of glances, the hostess turned to face the restaurant floor manager, who reluctantly nodded. I assumed that Haley smirked. After a few minutes, a tense-looking waiter led Haley to a table that was open next to the restaurant's corner. She glanced at it and instantly scowled. "You're kidding." The waiter tensed. "What's wrong, ma'am?" With a dramatic gesture towards a close corner booth by the window, which was filled with warm light and had a perfect panoramic view of the city skyline, Haley focused on the waiter. "Yeah, that's my table, go clear it," she said. And the server seemed shocked, astonished. "I'm afraid that table is already occupied." Haley laughed briefly and without humor. "Oh, honey, I doubt you realize that's my table." "I'm very sorry, ma'am. But those folks have already been seated, so we can't." "Are you deaf or simply stupid?" The waiter cleared his throat while attempting to maintain a steady tone. Haley lost her temper. She said flatly, "I'm a VIP, I get that. Table, I don't care how you do it. Offer them a free dessert, comp their meal, whatever, just get them out." She crossed her arms and said, "I don't care who is sitting there, I don't care if it's the Pope. Move them." The waiter then glanced at the manager across the room, who appeared extremely uncomfortable, but finally nodded slightly. When the table was finally empty, Haley turned back to the waiter and saw that he swallowed his annoyance and forced a stiff smile. "This way, ma'am." A few moments later, the unwary guests were graciously asked to move, and they weren't happy about it, of course, but the restaurant made up for it with free drinks and apologies. Before she even sat down, Haley snatched up her phone and clicked a record, as she found the ideal angle after strutting over and throwing her expensive purse onto the table. "Okay, sweethearts, we made it at last. And this view is so worth the wait." She made sure everything was just right by adjusting the lighting, but as she looked at her camera feed, something ruined the frame. In the background, an elderly man in a denim jacket was sitting a few tables away, eating a steak as if he had nothing better to do. Haley's expression soured instantly, and she narrowed her eyes at the man with the white beard and simple clothes. He looked cheap and out of place, as if he had wandered into a location far above his league. "Don't." Haley ignored her already on a mission. She stormed across the restaurant, her heels clicking against the marble floor, her phone still recording, and she stopped right at his table. placing one manicured hand on her hip. The man took a sip of his iced tea, his face unreadable as he finished chewing his book. He took his time, swallowed, and then raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah, you can get the hell out of my shot," Haley snapped. "You're sitting right in my frame, and no offense, but denim seriously at El Royale. What are you even doing here?" Haley's patience abruptly stopped listening. The man wiped his mouth with a serviette without breaking eye contact, and Haley blinked, saying, "I'm trying to create content. I have 2 million followers. I make more money in a month than you probably see in a year. Why don't you be a dear and take your little side dish somewhere else?" He leaned back in his chair and said, "No, I don't think I will, and I don't want to." The elderly man picked up his plate of iced tea, and with the slow, methodical movements of a man with nothing at all to prove, sat down in Haley's seat. "You're right," he said, settling in comfortably. "I should move for a moment." Haley was unable to comprehend what was occurring, so he sat in her chair, which was the best-lit room in the home, because of a force chair. The man took a sip of his tea and put the glass down with an almost insulting level of composure. Then he picked up his fork, cut into his steak, and took a bite as if she hadn't even been there. Haley blinked, the shock washing over her face in slow waves, and then the confusion quickly melted into pure, unfiltered outrage. "Excuse me? What are you doing?" People in the restaurant turned to watch, and Haley's jaw dropped. She could feel the heat creeping up her neck and her entire face burning. The soft hum of conversation had all but stopped, replaced by the faint but distinct sound of cameras recording. She could already hear a viral disaster playing out in real time, but she wasn't going to let that happen. No, she was going to control the narrative. As her indignation transformed into virtuous wrath, Haley jerked her phone out and switched to a live broadcast. "Lux babies, you won't believe what's happening right now." She hissed into the camera and angled the phone to show the man casually enjoying his meal at her table. "This rude old man literally took my seat in front of me, and she milked every ounce of her fury for the audience. I came here to enjoy a peaceful, elegant dinner, and now I have to deal with some entitled boomer who thinks he can just do whatever he wants. I swear, I'm shaking right now." But the drama was content, and Haley was a professional. She could already see the comments pouring in support rage, and her fans were going to destroy this guy online. But something wasn't right. Haley squinted at the screen, expecting validation, expecting her followers to support her, but the comments were completely different. "Hold on. Is it not him? Stop it, Haley girl. That's a legend. Is she really attempting to attack him? This is embarrassing, Haley. Please let me know who that is." Her stomach constricted and a strange feeling of unease overcame her, but she forced herself to ignore it. Apparently, the internet has chosen to support this guy, and she scoffed into the camera in an attempt to regain control. "I'm not sure who you all think he is, but let's be honest, he's just some random old man who's too cheap to dress nicely for a fancy restaurant." But the comments kept getting faster and more aggressive. Oh my God, someone told her that she was going to regret this so much. This is truly painful to watch. Haley felt something cold in her chest for the first time in a long time, and she had the sinking feeling that she wasn't in control. Then, someone in the comments dropped the bombshell. "That's Chuck Norris, Haley." Haley's face went pale as she jerked her head up, her eyes racing back to the man she had just branded a washed-up nobody, insulted and denigrated. And then, all of a sudden, everything clicked. The denim jacket, the quiet confidence, and the complete disregard for her outburst. Haley's fingers fumbled as she frantically swiped out of her live stream, saying, "No, no, no, this has to be fake." Her voice cracked as she hurried to check her phone and pulled up his profile. She felt the blood drain from her face when she saw the blue check mark and the follower count of 4 million followers, which was significantly more than she had. The worst part was that the entire restaurant was watching people with their phones out, recording her very public humiliation. Haley gripped her phone with shaking hands. "This isn't finished," she muttered. With each furious step, Haley's heels clicked against the shiny marble floor as she bounded down the hallway. Her phone was gripped so tightly that her knuckles turned white, and her face burned with shame and rage at the indescribable realization that she had just been humiliated in front of a whole restaurant by an elderly man who had made fun of her. Now that someone was going to pay for it, she pushed open the manager's office door, almost knocking it off its hinges. She yelled, "I want him out," at Mr. Thompson. Looking up slowly from his desk, the restaurant manager, a man in his late 60s with a calm manner derived from decades of handling challenging patrons, glanced at Haley and then at the agitated waiter directly behind her. Haley slammed her phone onto his desk. "Do you have any idea what just happened out there, that nobody just stole my seat?" "He embarrassed me." With his hands clasped together, Mr. Thompson's face was unreadable. "Blake, Miss, are you asking me to kick a paying client out of the restaurant? I'm not sure I understand." "I'm not asking," Haley said, "but I'm telling you to get rid of that old man, or I'll personally see to it that Lel's reputation is ruined." She lowered her voice to a low, menacing murmur, expecting Mr. Thompson to panic and apologize to grovel like so many others had. But instead he sighed as though she were merely a small annoyance. And then he said something that made her stomach drop. Mr. Thompson's tone changed from one of annoyance or even amusement to one of deep, unquestionable respect. He stood slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his pressed white sleeves, and looked Haley in the eye, saying that man was Chuck Norris. "Miss Blake, do you even know who you're talking about?" For the first time during the entire talk, Haley blinked her head, refusing to comprehend the words, and scoffed at Mr. Thompson, who seemed really upset. He shook his head and muttered something under his breath before standing up. "Chuck Norris is a legend," he stated clearly, "and he has inspired millions of people. He has dedicated his life to discipline, strength, and respect. While you were creating videos about expensive coffee and handbags, he was influencing the world. Now," he gestured at her, his voice calm but firm, saying, "You can come in here and demand that I remove a man like him." The restaurant had gone silent, and somewhere in the hallway, a waiter had left the door slightly open, and the whole dining area was listening. Haley felt their eyes on her, and Mr. Thompson's voice did not falter. For the first time in a long time, Haley's mouth opened and then closed, and she realized she was at a loss for words. "Blake, Miss, despite your wealth and millions of followers, you lack dignity." Haley's stomach. "You are misled into thinking that you have authority over others because you are well known online. You assume that you can demand respect without ever having earned it. But respect is not something you can purchase or coerce into giving it to you." Haley's nails dug into her palm, her lips squeezed together. "And you know what else? Not a single person in this restaurant is on your side," Mr. Thompson said, his voice as keen as a sword. Haley took a deep breath before realizing that her phone was still recording. She hadn't stopped her live stream, and the entire audience had heard everything and was commenting. "This is the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen Haley do. This may be the first time in history that someone was actually cancelled in real time." Her fingers fumbled as she abruptly ended the stream. But the damage had already been done. Her followers had turned against her. The internet had turned against her, and the restaurant wasn't even looking at her anymore. Mr. Thompson exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "Blake, Miss, I regret to inform you that I must ask you to leave." The manager nodded and Haley's eyes widened. "You can't be serious," she said. "We reserve the right to refuse service to guests who do not respect our establishment or our patrons, and frankly, Miss Blake, you've done neither." She chuckled a desperate, humorless laugh, meaning that she was making a mistake and that she needed me. I had the opportunity to make this place great before you left, but Mr. Thompson interrupted with a calm but decisive tone, saying that everything would be all right once you left. As Haley's stomach dropped, she gradually came to the realization that no one cared. The servers, diners and patrons of the restaurant who had earlier gazed at her as though she was significant had gone on and no longer found her significant. There was security. Still in a rage, Haley grabbed her suitcase and rushed out the door screaming, "This isn't over." But no one was paying attention. As she got to the door, she heard the elderly Chuck Norris speak one more time. Even though he had been silent the entire time, as she was departing, he raised his head and spoke in a steady, quiet voice. "Having millions of followers doesn't give you the right to treat people disrespectfully." The words lingered in the air for a second before Haley rushed out, slamming the door behind her. The restaurant was quiet for a while before someone began clapping, then another and another until everyone was cheering. Chuck Norris didn't respond. He just took another sip of his iced tea, picked up his fork, and resumed eating his steak. Haley Blake had previously been expelled from restaurants because when you were famous, people would either go out of their way to accommodate you or become intimidated by your success. Either way, you always ended up on top. However, tonight was different because she had stormed out of El Royale humiliated, furious, and with the nagging, unsettling feeling that something had gone horribly wrong. But it was fine, because she still had her audience, and her audience would always be on her side. As soon as she got into her car, she turned on her front-facing camera. Her face was still red with rage, and her breathing was heavy, but she forced herself to take a deep breath and put on her influencer voice, the same saccharine, carefully controlled tone she used when selling expensive skincare and discount codes. "Hey, Lux babies." She started, her voice shaking just enough to sound victimized, but not weak. "I just had the worst experience at El Royale. You guys won't believe what just happened." She paused, letting the anticipation build, then launched into her story, or at least the version of it she wanted people to believe. "So I was just trying to enjoy a peaceful luxury dinner when this rude old man came and stole my table. And then when I stood up for myself, the manager took his side and kicked me out. Like, are you kidding me? This is how they treat VIPs." She let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head. "I just feel so disrespected, you know, like I worked so hard to build my brand, to create content for you guys, and this is how I'm treated. It's disgusting. I'm literally shaking right now." She clicked the post button, sat back and waited. Any second now, her followers would rally, they would defend her, they would tear that place apart. But as the comments started rolling in, her smug expression started to fade. She felt she was reading them incorrectly at first. Perhaps she was only seeing a few unfavorable ones, and perhaps the true support was further down. But as she continued to scroll, "Chuck Norris, who has more followers than you, is shameful. I used to enjoy Haley, but this is so pitiful," that she truly believed she could cancel. That's what caused the panic to start to set in. Norris Chuck. The part of her live stream where she called him a washed-up old man was clipped by someone and mixed with clips of Chuck Norris roundhouse kicking people in old movies. And she watched with a racing heart as the likes and dislikes on her post stall skyrocketed and the memes began. When she saw who he was labeling an image on Twitter that said, "You try to cancel Chuck Norris, but you end up canceling yourself," another account zoomed in on her response. Her name was popular, but not in the way she had hoped. Before she even reached the parking lot, Haley's PR manager called, sounding as though she had just been struck by a truck. She was at a party, and her stomach fell. "After careful deliberation, we've chosen to break ways with her brand sponsors, so we're going to have to put our cooperation on pause for the time being while we reevaluate our collaboration agreement." "Haley, what did you do? Do you realize how awful this looks?" As Haley watched in terror as emails came in about brands canceling deals, companies severing ties, and PR teams separating themselves, she realized that her years-long, painstakingly built empire was collapsing in real time. Haley knew what she had to do. She had seen influencers go through scandals before she knew the playbook. Step 1, deny. Step 2, play the victim. Step 3, apologize but not really. She took a deep breath, hit record, and launched into her damaged control speech. "Hey guys," she started, her voice low and serious. "I just wanted to come on here and talk about the situation that happened at El Royale." She sighed deeply, rubbing her temples as if this was just so exhausting for her. "Look, I get that. People are mad. I get that some of you think I was being rude, but honestly, I was just standing up for myself. You guys have no idea how hard it is to be a content creator. Do you know how much effort it takes to curate the perfect aesthetic? How much pressure I'm under to constantly deliver high-quality content?" She paused, letting the guilt trip settle in. "I just feel like people are blowing this way out of proportion. It's honestly insane that in 2024, people are still trying to cancel influences for literally nothing. Like, do you guys even understand how social media works?" She shook her head and ended the video with a deep sigh, saying, "Whatever people want to hate, let them hate. I'm not going to sit here and beg for forgiveness over something that wasn't even a big deal. If you don't like me, unfollow me, simple." She posted it, sat back, and within minutes she realized she had just made everything worse. The backlash was immediate, and she still doesn't get it. She really said cancel culture like she didn't bring this on herself. She could have simply apologized, but no, she had to be Haley about it. The final nail in the coffin was when her manager called. Not her PR representative, not her assistant, but her actual manager. And the moment she answered, she knew his voice was exhausted. "Haley." She swallowed hard and her throat became dry. "What are you talking about?" For the first time in years, Haley Blake felt small, her power and influence gone. She had spent so much time building an empire based on attention, validation, and people knowing her name, and now it was all slipping away. She stared at her phone, the cancellation cementing itself in real time, the comments still rolling in, and finally, for the first time, a terrifying thought crept into her mind. Who was she without it? The sponsors, contracts, and every single one are gone, and her chest rigged. Chuck Norris never cared about numbers, and he never would. But it turned out that they did care about him. His number of followers skyrocketed overnight, surpassing 2 million, and his phone, which he hardly used, except to check the news and respond to texts from old friends, was buzzing like a wasp nest. His manager, who had long since given up on trying to persuade Chuck to embrace the digital age, was practically beaming, saying, "You've gone viral." Chuck responded, shaking his head in shock. "People are talking about how you handled the entire incident with Haley and stating that you are the epitome of class. You were already a legend, but now you are an internet legend." Chuck sipped his coffee and nodded slowly, but his manager smiled. "You're trending worldwide, and people want interviews, sponsorships, TV appearances, heck, even a few book deals." Chuck laughed, which wasn't bad for a guy who just wanted to eat his steak in peace. Chuck put his coffee down and looked out the window at the clear blue sky. He had seen this before, when fame was a strange thing that came and went quickly, and the people who pursued it always seemed to lose something along the way, uninterested. A man's value lies not in how many people know his name, but rather in how he treats those who don't, Chuck remarked simply, and his manager blinked, but not even a bit. Chuck shook his head. The manager groaned, massaging his forehead. "Chuck, at least do me a favor and appear on one of these shows where you can address the public. They appreciate you and are paying attention." Chuck slumped back in his chair, considering whether or not that was a horrible idea. Later that night, Chuck sat in a calm TV studio with a microphone fastened to his collar. Lights were softly glowing around him, and the interviewer, a woman with a nice smile and polished poise, looked at him curiously. "Norris, Mr. Haley made a mistake, sure, but we all do. He let the words sink in. She's young, so she has time to learn, and if people are willing to learn. In a dimly lit apartment across town, Haley Blake sat curled up on her couch with her phone clutched in her hands. Her face was streaked with mascara, and her eyes were swollen from hours of crying. The past few days had been a living nightmare. She had lost everything: her sponsors, her father, her followers, and her reputation. She had tried so hard to fight back, to explain things, to get people to see things from her side, but no one cared, and she was now a joke. However, as she watched Chuck, for the first time in a long time, Haley Blake felt small, not because she was irrelevant, but because she had finally realized what it meant to be insignificant. In the days that followed, she attempted to make a comeback by posting apologies rebranded. But this time, the tears were not from anger or frustration, but rather from shame. She had spent so much of her life seeking validation from strangers, sponsors, and numbers on a screen. But the one thing she had never considered being worthy of respect was somehow the man she had insulted. Haley Blake had to sit alone for the first time in years without an audience, without validation, without the constant din of approval. She had wanted to be seen, to be famous, to be admired, but she had never stopped to consider whether she deserved it. Her image did everything she could to regain her status, but people no longer cared. She was old news, and no one paid attention or watched. While this was going on, Chuck Norris resumed his quiet life. He went back to his regular training in the mornings, enjoyed a steak-in, and read in peace in the evenings without anyone pressuring him to move seats. When people recognized him, they saw a man of integrity who didn't need attention or pursue influence because, in the end, true influence isn't about numbers, but rather how you treat people when no one is looking. He was once stopped by a reporter on the street with a microphone in his hand. Mr. Norris asked what the most important lesson was from everything that had transpired. Chuck said, "Kindness doesn't cost a thing." And then, after pausing, he added, "But it's valuable." It was quite the journey. But before we conclude, let me just state that this story isn't true. That's priceless, people. Chuck didn't actually get into a restaurant showdown with an entitled influencer. But honestly, it feels like something that could happen in today's world, doesn't it? This story is more than just drama, it's a lesson. It makes us think about respect, humility, and what really matters in life. Haley had everything: fame, money, influence. But she forgot the most important thing: character. She thought of. Her followers made her untouchable, but in the end, people don't respect numbers, they respect actions. And then there's Chuck Norris, calm, unbothered, completely grounded. He didn't need to prove anything real. Strength isn't about flexing power, it's about knowing when to stay silent, when to stand firm, and when to forgive. One of my favorite moments when Chuck said, "Having millions of followers doesn't give you the right to disrespect others," that hit hard. Because let's be real, how often do we see people online who think clout makes them better than others? This story reminds us that respect is earned, not demanded. So what do you guys think? Do you know any real-life Haleys? Have you ever seen someone let power get to their head? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories with a little humor and a lot of life lessons. Next time, see you.